Hello guys, here Gabi again. Today we're going to talk about dependency injection in microservices. If, for example, our classes create their own dependencies, our code becomes very rigid, so and testing becomes painful. Dependency injection exists to break that coupling. Okay, so what is really dependency injection? Dependency injection is a pattern that allows us to decouple components, okay, by preventing a class from creating its own dependencies. I repeat, dependency injection is a pattern. It's a pattern that allow us to decouple component. We can separate components, okay, by preventing a class from creating its own dependencies. I have a class with dependencies. No, with dependency injection, we do not create that. Instead of instantiating concrete object inside the class, for example, if we have a class with that uses other classes, other services, and so on, we should instantiate them there. And no, with dependency injection, we do not do that. The class receives the abstractions, usually interfaces. Okay. So instead of instantiating concrete objects inside the class receives these abstractions, usually interfaces. And the container of the dependency injection, the DI container, is the responsible for resolving the concrete implementations at runtime operation time. Okay? So the class focuses on behavior, not on wiring. We repeat that. The class focus on behavior, not on wiring. So the dependency injection provides us to abstract the dependencies of a class, so we do not implement them or else instantiate them in our class, okay, inside the class. Usually we work with abstractions, the interfaces. So when we do not use them, when we do not use the dependency injection, the class becomes tied to concrete implementations. Okay, this is hard to change in the code. It has hidden coupling, and tests that require real databases or real HTTP calls is an example. For example, with dependency injection, you can swap implementations without changing the class. Okay, so how we apply dependency injection in our project? We follow the same structure as clean architecture. If we remember the clean architecture, and we can relate it with DDD. DDD is the language, is the model, is the describe, and the clean architecture is the structure. The clean architecture is the structure. Okay, the application layer that it is defined in the clean architecture defines the interfaces. First, the application layer defines the interfaces. For example, all of our repositories, the gateways, and the services. The application only knows what it needs, no, know how it's implemented. I repeat, the application only knows what it needs, know how it's implemented. Okay. Um, so the application defines the interfaces. Then the infrastructure implements those interfaces. This is where we use the entity framework core repositories, the HTTP client, for example, the use of Refit, the cache implementations, the provider integrations, and so on. Third, the API registers the dependencies in the .NET container. So, a throwback. The application only knows what it needs, know how it's implemented. Okay, it defines it implements, it defines the interfaces, and the infrastructure implements those interfaces, but the API registers the dependencies in the .NET container. Okay? So at runtime, the container wires everything together, and that's the key. The key is that the application depends on abstractions, the infrastructure plugs in the implementation, and the API composes the system. I repeat, the application depends on abstractions, for example, the contracts, the interfaces, it knows what it needs, know how it's implemented. The infrastructure plugs or adds the implementation, the how, for example, and the API composes all the system. Okay, so which is the payoff? We get less coupling, easier testing through mocks, easier provider swaps, and cleaner architecture boundaries. Okay, dependency injection makes clean architecture more practical. Okay, so as a sort of summary of what we are talking about, classes shouldn't create dependencies. We inject abstractions, not concretes. The application defines interfaces, the infrastructure implements them, and the API wires everything using VI. So the main objective, the key concept is that we always use classes, and the idea is no, not create dependencies along all the way. And the dependency injection help us through the use of clean architecture, unifying and composing the system with the application layer, the infrastructure layer, and the register of the API that glows everything at runtime. I hope this helped. If you like, give a thumbs up, subscribe, and have a good day. Bye bye.